Hey everyone, ready to dive into a topic that can hit your wallet pretty hard. We're talking tariffs, trade wars, and how global economics can impact your everyday life.
It's amazing how decisions made on the international stage can trickle down and affect us all.
Absolutely. And today we're specifically looking at President-elect Donald Trump's recent announcement about imposing some hefty tariffs.
These are on goods coming in from Canada, Mexico, and China.
We're talking potentially a 25% tariff on everything from Canada and Mexico and 10% on Chinese goods. I mean, that's a pretty significant jump, isn't it?
Oh, it definitely is. And the reasons he's giving for these tariffs are pretty interesting, too.
Like what? Fill us in.
Well, he's citing concerns about illegal immigration and the drug trade.
The drug trade specifically.
Yeah, specifically fentanyl.
Wow.
And he's also saying it's about pressuring China to do more to control fentanyl production.
Huh. You know, this kind of reminds me of something he did back in 2019. Remember when he threatened tariffs on Mexico over migration?
Yeah, that's a good point. It does seem like a similar tactic. That situation eventually de-escalated, but it definitely shows a pattern in his approach.
It really does. But let's get back to these new tariffs. A 25% tariff on everything. How does that even work with the USMCA? The trade deal he championed as a replacement for NAFTA.
Well, that's where things get complicated. The USMCA, or the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, is built on the idea of duty-free trade between these three countries.
Right.
So a 25% tariff basically throws a wrench in the whole thing.
Yeah, it seems almost contradictory, doesn't it? He pushes for this big new trade deal and then kind of undermines it with these tariffs.
Yeah.
What's the reaction been like from Canada and Mexico? I imagine they're not too thrilled.
Oh, you're right, they're not. Both Canadian and Mexican officials have expressed a lot of concern about this, and we've even seen the Canadian dollar drop in value since the announcement.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah,
That's a pretty clear sign that the markets are nervous about all of this.
it is.
What about China? How are they reacting?
Well, Asian markets have taken a hit too. There have been some pretty significant drops, which suggests this isn't being taken lightly on the global stage. And there's been a lot of talk about potential retaliation,
Retaliation meaning?
meaning retaliatory tariffs.
Oh, so like they would put tariffs on American goods.
Exactly. And that could escalate quickly and lead to a full-blown trade war.
Okay, a trade war. Now that sounds serious. What would that actually look like in reality?
Well, imagine Canada, Mexico, and China all hitting back with their own tariffs on American goods. It's like a domino effect. You get escalating tariffs that disrupt the whole global trade flow, and that ends up hurting everyone.
Everyone meaning,
Consumers and businesses on all sides.
yikes. So this isn't just some abstract economic theory. There are some very real consequences for American exporters and businesses.
Right.
But what about us? What about the average consumer?
That's a great question, because this could have a real impact on the things we buy every day.
How so? Give us an example.
Sure. Think about the auto industry. It's a really good example of how interconnected things are. Parts move back and forth across borders constantly during production.
Right.
Now, add a 25% tariff each time those parts cross a border, production costs are going to skyrocket. And you know what that means.
Car prices go way up.
Exactly.
Oof. So that new car I've been saving up for might suddenly be out of reach.
That's a real possibility. And it's not just cars. We could see this ripple effect impact the prices of everything. Groceries, electronics, you name it.
So basically everything gets more expensive.
Pretty much. Economists estimate that these tariffs could cost the average American household almost $1,000 more per year.
Ooh, $1,000. That's a lot of money. But wait, haven't we seen this before? Didn't Trump impose tariffs during his first term, mostly targeting China?
He did. It's important to look at what happened then because it gives us some context.
Okay, so remind me, what happened? What was the outcome of those tariffs?
Well, back then, he said that China would be the one paying for the tariffs. But in reality, those costs largely got passed down to us, American consumers, through higher prices.
So not quite the win-win he promised.
Not really. There was some growth, sure.
Right.
Certain domestic manufacturing sectors, but overall, it was pretty mixed bag.
Okay.
We saw retaliatory tariffs from China hurt American businesses,
Yeah.
and a lot of economic uncertainty, and that's never good for anyone.
It does sound a bit risky, like a gamble. With some possible upside, maybe, but also a whole lot of risk involved. So what are the experts saying about all this? Are they for or against these new tariffs?
It's pretty divided, actually. You've got people like Bill Ackman.
Who's that?
He's a hedge fund manager. He sees tariffs as a legitimate tool,
Okay.
potentially effective even, for achieving certain policy outcomes. He argues that Trump is using them strategically to advance American interests on the world stage.
Okay, that's one side of it.
Yeah.
But doesn't a hedge fund manager, I mean, wouldn't he actually benefit from, all this market volatility that a trade war could create?
That's a good point. It's definitely something to think about, like what their motivations might be.
Right.
And then you have a lot of economists who are very concerned about the potential downsides of a trade war.
Yeah,
They say that tariffs ultimately do more harm than good
too.
consumers and the economy as a whole.
So you've got these two sides. One saying tariffs are a strong negotiating tactic, the other saying they're dangerous and harmful. It's a lot to take in.
It is. And it just shows you how complicated this all is. International trade, how interconnected everything is in the global economy. You know, trying to use tariffs to control things like drug trafficking or immigration. It's like using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut.
Ooh, I like that. You could end up doing way more harm than good.
Hmm.
Okay, so where does all this leave us? What are the main takeaways for our listeners trying to make sense of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is this: trade policy. It affects us all. It's not just some abstract concept happening in Washington.
Right.
Whether you own a business, you're an employee, or just a consumer, these decisions have a direct impact on your life, your livelihood, your wallet even.
Absolutely. And it's not happening in some far-off boardroom.
Yeah.
These decisions affect the prices of things we buy every day. Like
Yeah.
we talked about earlier with the auto industry.
Exactly. Another key takeaway is that, well, history repeats itself. We can learn a lot from what happened during Trump's first term when he put tariffs on China.
Right. And those tariffs ended up hurting American consumers, led to retaliatory tariffs from China, created a lot of economic uncertainty. So will things be different this time around?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? It's hard to predict for sure, especially with all the complicated stuff going on globally and all the interconnectedness of global supply chains.
And what about the USMCA?
Yep.
The trade deal that was supposed to stabilize trade between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. How did these tariffs affect that agreement?
They've definitely thrown a wrench in things. Putting a 25% tariff pretty much negates the duty-free trade part of the USMCA.
It's like the agreement is being undermined before it even gets off the ground.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the future of trade between these countries?
That's a really good question. Like, if these tariffs happen, will it hurt the trust and cooperation between them? Will it lead to the USMCA falling apart? And will we go back to more protectionist policies?
It's definitely worrying. And it's bigger than just economics, isn't it? It's also about relationships between countries and global power dynamics.
Exactly. Trade policy can be used as leverage to influence other countries, to achieve political goals.
So it's all connected. Economics, politics, geopolitics, a lot to wrap our heads around. But at the end of the day, it's about how it affects people.
That's what matters most. We can talk all day about theories and agreements, but ultimately it's about how these policies affect American workers, the prices of things we buy, the overall health of our economy.
Yeah. It's about whether our groceries, our cars, everything we buy every day is going to get more expensive. It's about whether American businesses will succeed or struggle in the global market.
It's about finding a way to grow our economy in a way that's sustainable and fair for everyone in a world that's constantly changing.
Big questions. No easy answers.
Yeah.
But if we understand what's at stake, well, then we can start to navigate all of this, make informed choices
Yeah.
as consumers, as citizens, as participants in the global economy. Wow. So much to think about. We've really covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have.
From how these proposed tariffs might impact trade agreements to the ripple effects on consumers and businesses, I think it's safe to say this has the potential to shake things up big time.
It really does. And we talked about those differing viewpoints, right?
Right.
Some people who think tariffs are a powerful tool, a way to negotiate, and then others who warn about unintended consequences.
Yeah. And I think the thing that really stood out to me was the historical context.
Oh, absolutely.
Trump's tariffs from his first term. They didn't really go as planned, did they?
Not quite.
American consumers paid the price. And it sparked that trade war with China.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that we should learn from the past, think carefully about the long-term implications.
So where do we go from here? What's the big takeaway for our listeners?
This is important for all of us. Trade policy.
Yeah,
It's not just some abstract thing happening in Washington.
right.
It affects our everyday lives in very real ways.
Our cars, the food we eat,
Yeah,
clothes, everything.
exactly. And think about the millions of American workers and our economy as a whole. It affects all of us.
So what can we do? Do we just wait and see what happens?
No way. Stay informed. That's the most important thing.
Informed about what?
understand the issues,
Hmm.
the different viewpoints, and talk about it.
Talk about it.
Yeah. Have conversations about what the best way forward is.
Okay, good point.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. Challenge those assumptions. It's so easy to get caught up in the rhetoric, the sound bites, but we need to dig deeper. Think critically about what all of this could mean.
So true. So much of this is about going beyond those simple narratives.
Yeah,
It's a complex issue. International trade
it is.
and how to create economic prosperity that works for everyone.
Absolutely.
And maybe the most important thing to remember is this. We're all in this together.
We are.
Business owners, workers,
Yeah.
consumers, we all have a role to play in shaping a global economy that's sustainable and fair.
I love that. That's a great point. We can't just sit back and watch. We all need to participate, help shape the future of trade, make sure it benefits everyone, not just a select few.
That's such an important message to end on. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we hope you'll keep learning, keep asking questions, keep talking about this important topic.
That's crucial.
Because at the end of the day, it's about creating a world where we all have the opportunity to succeed,
That's it.
no matter where we live or what we do.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So one last thought for you to ponder.
I like this.
In a world where everything is so interconnected,
Right.
can we afford to turn inward? Can we afford protectionist policies? Or do we need to find new ways to work together, to cooperate, for everyone's benefit?
That is the question. Something to think about for sure.
It is. Until next time, keep diving deep, everyone.